Today on Blue 58, the Packers have a new uniform, and you've got questions about the Packers. Let's take a look at both.
Blue 58!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Blue 58, the one and only podcast of thepowersweep.com. I'm your host, John Meerdink, and I'm happy to be with you here for another episode, in part because we get to start off talking about one of my favorite topics, uniforms. Packers have a new alternate uniform, not entirely unexpected, not really unexpected at all. Though my original timeline was way off. I thought it was coming next year because I misread the original report from UniWatch about the white helmet leaking. That report said it was coming for 2024. Misunderstood that to be 2025. An honest mistake if you can't read like I can't. So big problems there. Would have predicted this month being when they'd unveil it had I read things correctly. And wouldn't you know, here we are August 1st with the Packers unveiling their new, winter warning uniform. Anyhow, basically as expected, new white helmet, they pair it with their white jersey and white pants. I think on its own, the helmet looks pretty good. If you zoom in real close in some of the press photos that they've released, the gold flecks in the white are a nice touch. There are a few things I don't like here. The comparative lack of gold or yellow or whatever you want to call it in the helmet when paired with the rest of the uniform, it looks understated in a way that isn't necessarily good. I also hate wearing white at home. The Packers at Lambeau Field need to be as you picture them in your mind. Green jerseys, gold pants, gold helmet. Full stop. That's how it needs to be. There's been a long-standing rule on this podcast and on thepowersweep.com that if you wear white at home, you deserve to lose. That's mainly a dig at the Cowboys, for the record, that long-running quasi-joke there. But if you try to get too fancy or over dramatic and wear your white uniforms at home, I think you deserve to lose. And so, are we saying the Packers deserve to lose when they play the Texans at home? More on that here in a second, because that's when they are playing the Texans, when they are unveiling these uniforms for real on the field. But on top of adding this to the rotation, if the Packers were their green throwbacks at any point this year, that'll be 2 home games when they're not wearing their best uniforms, which is overall a bit of a gripe for me too. But related to that previous point, the Packers are going all winter and cold and dark and winter warning instead of white cheddar, which is obviously the superior name. They're doing all that, and then they're going to play the Texans for a noon game in October 20th, by the way. Just for your frame of reference, here are the kickoff temperatures for the Packers' last 5 years of home games in October. 39 degrees last year against the Vikings, 49 degrees against the Jets in 2022, 49 degrees against the Washington football team in 2021, 53 against the Falcons in 2020, 55 against the Raiders in 2019, and 43 against the Lions in 2019 as well. And it should be noted that the Falcons game and the Lions game were both primetime games. Suffice it to say, there's not going to be snow for this winter warning. The winter warning is going to be overblown, as is often the case with winter warnings as those things go. But overall, it's fine. And look, before you push back on any of my criticism, I understand this is not for me. I am a pretty traditional uniform guy, pretty dyed-in-the-wool traditional. I recognize that I am not the target market. And it is kind of fun to see something a little bit different for the Packers, too. As far as I know, this is really the first true alternate in Packers history. They've had throwbacks before, historical alternates, like the all-green thing they've got going right now, but never just an alternate look, which is kind of neat. I do wish they'd explored some of those throwback options rather than chasing a trend. Just for instance, and this may not be a time period you necessarily want to hearken back to, but they've already got a 1950s era throwback. In 1958, the Packers actually did have an all-white uniform. You can see guys like Bart Starr and Paul Hornung wearing it if you look far enough back in the archives. It had a white helmet, a white jersey with really interesting sleeve stripings, white pants, solid green numbers, and no gold to be found anywhere on the uniform at all. If they wanted to really go that route, that's something that they could have done, and it would have been era appropriate for that green uniform. A couple of years later, but it would have been in that area too. All that to say, at least it's not a black alternate. That would have been a bridge too far even for me. I can at least get on board with a white uniform. It looks fine. Black uniform would have been too much for me. Let's see it on the field, and let's hope that at least they get a win in it at home, whether or not they deserve it. Question time. I feel like we are still in a fairly low information environment in training camp. We are starting to see some trends. We're a week and a half in at this point, let's call it that. We are getting some more and more information, and the things that may have been just a one-off or a couple-day things are now starting to be longer and longer-term thing. Eric Stokes settling in as the Packers' second cornerback there. Kadeem Telfort continuing to get reps with the ones as Zach Tom is out, ahead of Andre Dillard, ahead, I guess, nominally, of Jordan Morgan, who's hanging out at right guard and seems to be solidifying a hold as the Packers' starting right guard. We are almost there as far as getting some actual real information about the Packers, though. But we need some chaos. We got to get to family night and then have one, like just a kicker, completely forget how to kick. Like he lines up and tries to kick the ball left-footed or something like that, whatever his opposite foot normally is. We need a preseason game where somebody who's been getting a bunch of reps with the first team just goes out there and either like really crushes it, like, wow, this guy is really actually something, or just plays completely awful and you're like, now what do we do? We need some joint practices where things get a little bit chippy and you see who's the guy that's going to step up and give it back to the other team. Just a little chaos. We need something to change here while we sort out what's going on with this team. But in the meantime, I threw it out for questions in our Discord server, see what was on people's minds as we kind of meander through this early portion of training camp. And we got a few good ones, so I thought we would take a look at them today. If you want to be a part of answering or offering those questions, the Discord server is the best way to do that. And to join that, you've got to either be a supporter of our Patreon or through Substack, patreon.com/thepowersweep or thepowersweep.substack.com. Join the paid versions of either of those options, and you'll have your ticket to that server. You can hang out there, chat with Packers fans from all over the world, and ask questions and be first in line when I get to those questions and have the first crack at asking them when those opportunities come up. First one out of the gate is Papa Rooster. In researching the new kickoff rule, he writes, I'm finding myself wondering how far this existential rabbit hole goes with kickoffs. It seems like teams are just preparing to kick the ball out of the end zone every time. Hypothetically, let's say the 2024 season ends with 80% of kickoffs ending in a touchback. Would there still be a point to the kickoff then? Is football without a kickoff still football? How would you feel about an air quotes kickoff that involved no kick? The return man would simply start with the ball and they begin to run when the whistle blows. Is it not a kickoff without a kick? Is it time we start to radically reconsider starting position for an offense in total? I think we're headed that direction. Something radical has to happen. And we might be getting something radical here with this new kickoff rule. I am skeptical of this new rule, and it sounds like Packers special teams coordinator Rich Bisaccia is too. He's expecting in-season rules changes to this rule. Maybe not wholesale stuff, but tweaks. I think that seems likely right now because it seems like there's a pretty obvious loophole in the rules right now. So you've got this landing zone, right? From the goal line to the 20-yard line is where the kickoff has to land to be returnable. But if you kick it into the landing zone and it goes into the end zone for a touchback or into the end zone and then out of bounds, the kickoff just comes out to the 20-yard line? There is no return option there. Just put it that way. There's no return option regardless of what line you get to. That seems like the loophole here or the killer strategy for the kickoff. If you want to make sure that nobody's kicking off, you just kick it or returning your kicks. You figure out how to do a screaming line drive kick that bounces somewhere between the goal line and the 20 and then goes into the end zone and out of the end zone. That seems to be what teams would try to do here. How do you counter that? You just try to stop that. You grab the kick before it goes out of bounds and you return it. But it doesn't seem like the elegant sort of kickoff return-producing thing that the league is clearly going for. And I think the team or the league wants to have kickoff returns. I think they want to preserve that play because of how it looks visually and how it ties to the history of the sport. That's how we're all conditioned to seeing football games begin or possessions begin after a score. I'm not sure if they can preserve the kickoff and also accomplish their other goals of making them safer as well. It's a dangerous play in an already dangerous sport. It stands out as a uniquely dangerous play. If you've ever practiced it or been a part of it in a game, you understand the velocity involved on a kickoff return, the violence of the collisions on those plays it stands out in the sport. They are unusually strong for a relatively low value play. And that's what the NFL wants to get away from. I'm not sure you can get away from that kind of violence and still have a kickoff. I do want to throw out something else that's come up over the years. Former Buccaneers coach Greg Schiano is associated with an option that is similar to a no-kick kickoff. It's only for onside kicks, but it's the 4th and 15 onside kick. Basically, you line up for one 4th and 15 play from the normal kickoff line area, so the 35 or the 40 or whatever it is. You could tweak it for your purposes there. But basically, in a situation where a team would want to kick an onside kick, instead of kicking the onside kick, which has such an extremely low success rate, you instead get one 4th and 15 play. If you don't convert, the other team takes over wherever you got to. If you got 12 yards, well, you're out of luck. They get the ball at midfield or close to it. If you get no yards, you're buried deep in your own territory, and the other team has a chance to score right away, which may or may not matter to you. If you're attempting this, you're probably losing anyway. The point is, there are non-kicking versions of this kind of play out there. There's already one that's gotten some support, the Schiano proposal, for onside kicks. I think you could probably do something similar for kickoffs in general. It may take something more creative than that, but it is out there. There are those sorts of discussions. You probably have to continue to explore that in some other ways and have some real play testing here. That seems to be the big problem with this current proposal. They're just not going to get a lot of play testing for it, and that's probably why you're going to get some of those tweaks that Bisaccia was talking about. Patrick King comes out hot here. First question from Patrick: what would you say your worst ever Packers take has been? I was telling my brother back in 2021 how much I thought Amari Rodgers was the perfect pick at the time. Hey, you and Brian Gutekunst. And he would dominate the league. I've had some bad ones. The problem is the bad ones tend to get shoved out of your mind. You tend to have a lot of confirmation bias looking back, and it's easy to focus on areas where you were right. I'll always be chastened by my earliest reaction to Jordan Love. That's one reason why I don't want to do Twitter stuff anymore. But calling that move indefensible, obviously there were defenses to it. We did start walking that back essentially immediately, even on draft weekend, draft night. It's not that it was ever really truly indefensible. It's just that the narrow road to success there was very narrow, and they were burning 2 draft picks when they just come off the NFC Championship game. We don't need to belabor that point. You all get that. We're still on that narrow road, but there's a lot of narrow road ahead of us. It's this decision is still an open discussion, though things are headed in the right direction. But outside of that, an assortment of ones. I was very mad in 2013. This was way pre-podcast. This is back in the Packers Perspective days, or the Packer Perspective days. PackerPerspective.wordpress.com is still out there if you want to check that out, some of my earliest work. Was very mad back in 2013 when the Packers missed out on former Los Angeles Rams, or St. Louis Rams at the time, running back Steven Jackson in free agency, was said to be interested in the Packers. I thought it was a great fit. He signed with the Atlanta Falcons instead, and the Packers that same spring ended up drafting Eddie Lacy, which worked out for the Packers about as long as Jackson worked out for the Falcons for a much lower price. So that was a miss for me. I was all the way in on Dayton Jones that same year. I thought he was going to be a great fit for the Packers, and he was okay. Just definitely didn't live up to his draft status. I don't know if I would call it a bad take, but I was very pro trading for Khalil Mack in 2018, which would have cost us Rashawn Gary. That there are a bunch of different directions you could go with that one. If the Packers trade for Khalil Mack in 2018, What do they do in free agency the next year? Do they sign either of the Smith brothers, one of them? What kind of money do they have to play with? Who else could they sign? Do they have to give up Billy Turner or Adrian Amos? How does that affect them into 2020 and beyond? There's a bunch of different ways that you can go with that. I much rather would have Rashawn Gary today than Khalil Mack today. I could say that for sure. But I guess among those things, any prisoner of the moment take is going to turn out to be pretty bad. So I think that's a good reminder for myself and for everybody else who wants to do takes. Just try not to get too caught up in the moment. At the same time, I was thinking about this the other day. I have never really known what to call myself in regard to what I do with the Power Sweep and Blue 58. I hate the term content creator. I feel like I'm not just a blogger. I'm not just a podcaster either. I don't know if I'm a journalist per se, but I've often heard journalism described as the first draft of history. So if we're covering Packers history, which is something that we do on this podcast and on thepowersweep.com, thinking of myself as someone who does a lot of first drafts is sometimes satisfying. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing takes and content and stuff, is that all of this is kind of a first draft, and your takes should evolve over time as you figure out and get more context for things. Because context is really all that matters here, just trying to put things into the context that you can. And that's where your takes should be. So whatever takes you have, don't just put them out there and hang on to them forever. Say, this is what I think right now, and that could change. And if people are going to take you to task over changing your stance in that sort of context, it's them that's wrong, not you. Because if you reconsider your thoughts and beliefs in light of new information, well, that makes you smart, not dumb. But if you say stupid stuff or you say anything and you hang on to that just as your first impression forever, that's the real dumb thing to do. So those are the real bad takes. And I've probably got a couple of those kicking around that I've just I've committed to forever. Maybe it's wearing white at home makes you deserving of a loss. Maybe that's one of them. But there's got to be some stuff out there that you commit to something that you thought of initially and just don't ever really change. That's the real version of the bad take. Ray of the Clan Nitschke asks, is C.J. Stroud the next GOAT? And then he shares a video of The Athletic. You trying to get me, Ray? You can't. You will not get me on this question. I will not go down the GOAT discussion path. Yes, I will. You could talk about prisoner of the moment's takes, and then you talk about the greatest of all time discussion. This is one of the things that gets me riled up, talking football or sports in general. I hate greatest of all time discussions with a passion. They're stupid. We waste so much time on them. Say that you decide that a player, let's just go with the football example. Say that we get everyone to agree that Tom Brady is the greatest football player of all time. So what? What does that matter? Is every football game played in comparison to Tom Brady then? Or what do we achieve by determining that? If you can't appreciate any player for what they can do, you're missing the whole point of this exercise anyway, because maybe Tom Brady is the greatest football player ever. Maybe it's Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's Peyton Manning. Maybe it's Jim Brown or Reggie White or Lawrence Taylor or LaDainian Tomlinson or Barry Sanders or Jim Taylor or Paul Hornung or you just go down the list, pick your favorite. Does any of that help the 2024 Packers? They haven't got any of those guys out there. So what we're trying to figure out is, how do these guys win? All it really comes down to, the vast majority of the time, is people who want to say the sport is the best when I watched it. You see that with the MJ versus LeBron discussions. You see that with Wilt Chamberlain versus Shaq in basketball. You see that with most of the quarterbacks. People who grew up watching Joe Montana and Steve Young tend to defend those people. People who grew up before that might want to go back even a little bit further. I will say that, as I've always, it's so context dependent. Like, you can adjust stats for eras. You can't adjust mindsets for eras. You are holding the past to standards that didn't exist at the time when you're trying to determine it. If you did that in reverse, it would make no sense at all. Like, I've made this point in other conversations with other people, talking about the greatest all-time of all-time debate. Maybe Tom Brady is one of the great quarterbacks of all time, but he couldn't have gotten on the field for Curly Lambeau's offense because quarterback meant a different thing then. Quarterbacks were blocking backs. They didn't throw the ball. They had to be fast, shifty runners who could get out in space and block for people. Does that sound like Tom Brady? Well, it sounds like he's not the greatest quarterback of all time then because he couldn't have even played the position if you go back far enough. Could he have played in the Iron Man era? Probably not. Those are uniquely great football players in history, the guys that were actually good on both sides of the ball. That's one of the best things about guys like Don Hutson or Sammy Baugh, like guys that were legitimate great contributors on both sides of the ball. Or just look at how much more valuable punting was way back in the day. This is something Cliff Christel of Packers.com harps on all the time. He's been making a case over the past couple of years that former Packers, I think he's an end, he may be a back, the positional designations way back in the day. But anyway, he played way back in the day in the 30s and 40s, Vern Llewellyn. He argues that Llewellyn should have more Pro Football Hall of Fame consideration because he was a great punter. He was considered the best punter of his era, which doesn't sound like much to our ears, but at the time it was hugely valuable. How do you contextualize that? He may not have the great running stats or receiving stats, but he was hugely valuable in other ways. Do you factor that into all time? Because none of the quote-unquote all-time greats today that play on offense or defense exclusively can punt worth a darn at all. So I would say in that context, C.J. Stroud probably not the next greatest of all time, and it kind of defeats the purpose of talking about greatest of all time anyway if you're already looking for the next one. Who cares who's the greatest if you're just looking for the next good guy? Kevin asks, and I love this question, as someone who, I love all the questions, but this one piqued my interest today in particular, and we got to do a fun little exercise here. Anyway, that's the cart before the horse. Let's get to the question first. Kevin asks, as someone who has more recently gotten into football, what are the concepts that are important to go from a beginner to more intermediate understanding of how the game works? Are there any particular examples on the Packers that are good to pay attention to? Let's answer the second part of that question first. I would make it a point, if you want to understand how the game works, try to understand how coaches are evaluating their players and who's standing out to them. And there's a very easy way to do that. Just go to the Packers YouTube page and listen to all the assistant coach interviews when you can. So Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur are going to talk mainly about high-level stuff. If you want to get down to the nitty-gritty of how the roster is coming together, listen to the coordinators and the position coaches when they talk, because they will give you insight into who's growing and how and what goes into that sort of thing. So case in point on this, on Monday, Rich Bisaccia talked to the media, and somebody asked him about Tyler Davis. And he gave a very revealing answer on what Davis did with the Packers during his injury last year. So Davis tore his ACL during training camp last year and was out for the season. A lot of times, guys just go off and do their own things during rehab. Some of them, the way the teams handle it, don't have much of a relationship with the team at all, but not Tyler Davis. Bisaccia set him up as essentially a de facto special teams coordinator, had him looking at different scouting reports, stuff like that, trying to give him an understanding of the special teams unit as a whole and his role within it if and when he came back down the line. Now, that's doing him a solid as a coach, for one thing, for Bisaccia, but it also shows the value that he places on a guy like Tyler Davis, who in 2022 was the Packers' leading special teams snap getter user. He led the team in special team snaps. Set myself up for a bad one there. That's an interesting insight, and you can glean a lot of those sorts of things listening to those assistant coaches. So if you want to understand the game, think of it from a coach's perspective, which is going to help you understand roster building, which will lead you into one of the biggest concepts you need to get, going from a beginner understanding of football to an intermediate understanding of football. Players, not plays. We talk about schemes, we talk about coaches, we talk about 4-3 or 3-4 or wide zone or pro style or spread or air raid, or maybe I'm just playing too much college football 25. I don't know, probably. You talk about the schemes all day long, but the players are the ones that are going to make the difference most of the time. Talent wins out the vast majority of the time. There are very few cases in the NFL, a team or a league with a lot of parity in it. a league where anything could go any which way on any given Sunday, most of those times where it looks like an upset, it's because of player availability. Because most of the time, the team with the more talent is going to win out, just because that's really what matters more. But related to that, the one thing I would tell someone who's trying to go from a beginner understanding to a more intermediate understanding of football, and take this with a grain of salt. I don't claim to be smart about football. The goal here is to create smarter Packers fans, blah, blah, blah. Please don't ever please don't ever misunderstand me not saying that as saying I'm a smarter Packers fan here to teach you. I just want to try to talk about this in a process-driven way that helps all of us get smarter together, because the more I learn about this, the less I realize I know. But the number one thing I would tell people looking to enhance their football knowledge is a lesson from Bill Walsh himself. All football is situational. Every play it happens within a larger context that affects what goes on that play, the things that you decide to do on that play, and what that play signifies within the larger scope of a game. So down and distance, obviously, but field position, your goal for a drive, and the time remaining in a game all matter way more than even we get on just a Sunday football broadcast. Obviously, your ultimate goal is to score every time you have the ball or stop the other team from scoring every time they have the ball, but you know that's not going to happen. But thinking about things situationally will change the way that you watch a game. Considering the interplay between offense and defense on a given drive, or the offense itself within a given scope or situation, that really will add to your understanding of the game. I picked a game at random from last year to take a look at. I just moved my cursor around on the screen and landed on the Packers-Chiefs game from last December. The Packers had a great situational drive to watch in the fourth quarter. So they take over with 10:41 to go in the fourth quarter on their own 23 after a Chiefs punt. The Packers at this point lead 21-19. So if you're Matt LaFleur on the sideline, you're watching Jordan Love run out onto the field, you're getting ready to either send in the play call or you've told him the play call already, you're thinking about a couple things here. First, you're up 21-19. You don't have to go out and get a score right now. It's not the be-all, end-all to get a score. You'd like to extend your lead if you could, but if you can't do that, you at least want to run clock. Okay, what do we got to do to run clock? We got to at least move the ball a little bit or run plays that are going to allow us to keep the clock moving while we have the ball. So let's try to get a first down in a way where we're going to take some time off the clock and set up our defense a little bit if we can't score. So we want to move the ball. That's our number one goal here, is to keep the ball moving. So let's get a first down. If we can get a first down, we can probably take about 30% of the remaining time off the clock if we can at least do that. So a first down alone is probably going to get this game clock under 6 minutes. Let's see what we can do here. First and 10, 23-yard line. What do we want to do? Well, first down, 10 yards to go. We want to set ourselves up to get a first down, so we need to carve out some yards. They turn the ball over to A.J. Dillon, and he cracks off 4 yards. Great. That sets us up with a 2nd and 6. That's a good down and distance. We've opened up the playbook a little bit. So we're still in a fairly manageable situation if things go sideways here and we end up on a 3rd down and 6. Even if we don't get any yards, that's doable. So Jordan Love drops back to pass, incomplete to Ben Sims. No problem. Setting up a 3rd and 6, that's manageable. But there's a problem. Holding penalty on Rasheed Walker, 10-yard penalty. We are in trouble. 2nd and 16 then. We're looking to get we're looking to get this in a 2-down conversion sort of situation. So we probably got to get half the yards here, 8 to 10 yards or so to make it 3rd and manageable at least. So trying to get back some yards here. You could think run here, but Matt LaFleur is going to think pass because that's been working for him. And what do you know what happens on that 2nd and 16 play? Jordan Love goes deep, 27 yards downfield to Romeo Doubs. Huge, explosive play. Now we're really cooking. The whole complexion of this drive has changed. We are out to our own 44-yard line after losing 10 yards on that holding penalty. Then a 27-yard completion sends us way downfield. All right, drive is new now. 1st and 10. We've taken about 90 seconds off the clock to this point. We want another yard gainer. Let's keep that clock moving, but maybe we want a little bit of aggression here. Let's see what happens. Let's look in our playbook for something for Christian Watson, our most explosive player on offense. End around to Watson for 13 yards. Huge. 2 explosive plays in a row. Now we're really cooking. We're in Chiefs territory and we're moving. This is where we get situational in a different kind of way. We've now advanced to the 43-yard line of the Chiefs, and at 1st and 10, I'm looking at down and distance here. I know that if I get to the 33-yard line, I can have a 55-yard field goal or a 50-yard field goal. That means if I get another 5, maybe 6 yards, I'm looking at 54, 55. I'm on the outer limit of Anders Carlson's range here, but I'm feeling a lot better here because if we extend the lead with a field goal and the Chiefs need to get a touchdown to take the lead. 24-19 is a pretty good place to be. So I can get a little bit more aggressive here. What do? Drop back to pass again. Incomplete. That's fine. We're still in a good down and distance here. 2nd and 10, we turn it over to A.J. Dillon. Again, keeping in mind that if I just get 5 yards here, I'm at the outside limit of Anders Carlson's range. Turning it over to A.J. Dillon is fairly conservative, but still helps us keep our goals in line. We can get some more points and we can keep running clock. And what do you know? Dillon busts off a 10-yard run. Now we're down to the 33-yard line. We're in field goal range. We've run about 3 minutes off the clock, down to 7:42. Now we can start to get a little bit more aggressive. Jordan Love goes deep for Christian Watson, incomplete, but 2nd and 10, still being aggressive. Jordan Love finds Malik Heath for 15 yards. Not quite an explosive play, but picks up another first down. Now we're on the Kansas City 18-yard line, red zone time. Situation changes again. The kind of defenses you're going to get changes a little bit. Can't go deep necessarily. Your field is from the 18, 28 yards long, so you're not going ultra deep stuff. Everything gets more compressed. Couple of short passes. 1st and 10, incomplete. 2nd and 10, incomplete as well. Looking for Tucker Kraft. 3rd and 10. That's a pretty tough down and distance, especially facing an aggressive defense like the Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo. What happens here? Well, we're looking at 3rd and 10. We'd like to get a little bit closer or maybe get a first down. So we're thinking pass almost for sure. But we're well within field goal range here. So if we got to eat a sack, that's fine. And wouldn't you know it, Jordan Love gets sacked on 3rd and 10, setting up a 40-yard field goal for Anders Carlson, who knocks it through. A lot of different situations on that drive, a lot of different things going on there, and you can see how your play calling or mindset changes as you go throughout that drive. That is situational football. That's really what matters when you're calling plays, when you're thinking about drives and how all that works, and that is what's going to take your football understanding to the next level, recognizing all of those situations, trying to track them throughout the game. Nick R. asks, let's say, hypothetically, that one has recently moved from the green pastures and verdant forests of Wisconsin to the home market of some godforsaken expansion team, such as the Kansas City Chiefs. How would you best defend your Packers fandom / minority team ownership and maybe even convert a few people along the way? Don't hold back either. Let's put some feet to the fire here. Well, if I really wanted to rag on the Chiefs, I would say it looks like their uniforms were designed by McDonald's, that they have an unscrupulous, unethical owner, that they need to update some of their cultural aspects of some of their branding, and that Travis Kelce is just kind of annoying in general. But I wouldn't do that because I don't think the way to win converts is to yuck anybody's yum or to try to get in anybody's face about anything like that. So, if you happen to mention any of those things, by all means. But if you want to convert people or defend your own team, here's how I would go about it. First of all, don't worry about defending your own likes. That's the number one power move. If someone wants to come after you about something that you like or support or whatever, don't worry about it. Say, yeah, I like it. What's it to you? Who cares? Just don't even worry about it. I have it easy in the areas where I live. I've lived in Minnesota. I've lived near Lions territory. There's no NFC teams in Ohio where I live now. It bothers the heck out of Vikings fans if you're a Packers fan. The only thing that they can ever get over you is if they beat the Packers that year, because otherwise you just point to the trophy case, point to the legacy, and do the thing that makes them the most mad. Just say, I don't think about you at all. Put a pin in that one. We'll come back to it. But if people want you to make you defend supporting the Packers, go this route. This is what I would do. Say, the question asker here, Nick, do you want the ultimate comeback in every situation? Just point to the community ownership here. My team will never be subject to the behest of one person, and we will never have to worry about one owner changing the entire direction of the franchise. That's not something that is ever going to be a concern for me. You need more than that? What about the great history and the great present? No team has a richer history than the Packers. The Patriots can point to their recent success, that's fine. The Chiefs can point to their recent success, that's fine. The Packers can point to 13 titles in their history, dating back to the earliest days of the sport. No team can match that. There are also few teams with a brighter present. If you really want to dive into the weeds, you can talk about how hard it's going to be for the Chiefs to maintain things going forward. There's a good chance they're never going to reach this level again. But the Packers have everything in front of them. They've got cap space for days, for years. They've got a young core here, and they're only going to add talent going forward. There's a good chance that the Packers are ahead of everybody in the league. I don't know if I 100% believe this, but there's a good chance that in terms of the trajectory of their team, they're ahead of everybody a year or 2 years from now. There are few teams that can match that in the NFL right now. They've also, again, got that legacy of success, not just history, but just the legacy of how they've built this franchise. They've never been driven by a rich owner. They've never been driven by market demands. They have always been the smallest market in the league, driven by what's best for the community and what's best for the team. It is the purest football experience in the NFL. Nobody can match it. It's impossible because nobody has those same things. And to circle back to what I was saying earlier, because of those things, you never have to think about an NFL team. Look, another NFL team if you don't want to. You never have to worry about what they're doing or how you're going to compare to them because the Packers are unique. Yeah, the Chiefs are great right now. Somebody else is going to be great in the future. When the Chiefs aren't good and some other team is good and you're talking about their quarterback is one of the potential greats ever or their run or their potential dynasty, the Chiefs can be irrelevant. The Packers' history will always be there. It will always be unique. But you never have to worry about that. You never have to worry about comparing the Packers to another NFL team. Just look at the NFC North. The Bears, the Lions, and the Vikings are all defined by their relationship to the Packers. They can argue about that until they're blue in the face, but Lovie Smith takes over as the head coach of the Bears. He says his number one job is to beat the Packers. Matt Nagy does the same thing. Dan Campbell talks about going after the Packers. The Vikings perpetually going after Packers, signing old Packers players once they've run their course in Green Bay. All of those teams exist only in opposition to the Packers. That's the entirety of their identity. But the Packers are defined by their relationship to their own history. That's all the Packers have to compare themselves to. Think about that meme you see from Mad Men from time to time. I feel bad for you. Well, I don't think about you at all. That meme is taken horribly out of context within the show. It means the exact opposite of what the meme means in the context of the show. I don't care. Every other NFC North team could say they feel bad for the Packers. I don't care about them at all. I do not waste a single second thinking about them. Think about how much of this offseason we've gone through without ever talking about another team. I don't know if it's ever come up. We've never worried about what another NFC North team has been doing this offseason. Because it doesn't matter. The things that are important about the Packers are always going to matter. The things that are important about the Chiefs, just for your example here, are going to be irrelevant 5-10 years from now. Eventually there will be no more Patrick Mahomes, no more Andy Reid, no more Chiefs dynasty. The history of the Packers, though, that's always going to be there. That community ownership, that's always going to be there. The Packers are relevant in that way forever. And no one else can match that. They've got the best game day experience, the best history, the best uniforms, the best owner in sports, me, or maybe you, and no one else can match that. So that's what I would say to anybody asking about why you support the Packers and why maybe they should support them as well. A couple quick ones here. Yesiah asks, would it be crazy to say our defensive back room almost mirrors our wide receiver room and that any of them can make a play potentially based on training camp reports? We see Kalen King making splash plays. We hear Eric Stokes is back apparently, and we already know Jair Nixon and Carrington Valentine can play. Throw in the safeties there as well. I think this is a good theory, and I think in theory it is close, but we got to see it first. I am cautiously optimistic about the defensive backs. There is still a lot that we don't know about this team. about how they're going to play, about how they're going to play together, about what Jeff Hafley is going to do with them. But I agree that it is a pretty deep room here and a room full of guys that could potentially make plays. Just look how set the cornerback room is at this point. I mean, you're talking about the real competition starting at your fourth or fifth or your sixth cornerback on the roster. That's a good place to be in. I think optimism about the defensive back room is warranted. Finally, Old Packers fan sends us off with 3 questions kind of grouped together. Who from the 2022 draft class is going to get the first extension? Who from the 2022 draft class are with the Packers beyond 2026? And who ends up being quarterback 2, running back 2, right guard, offensive tackle 3, cornerback 2, and safety 2 when we play the Eagles in Brazil? So those forward-looking questions first. I think looking at that first extension out of the 2022 draft class in Green Bay, my money would be on Zach Tom. He plays a premium position. He's been a consistent high-level performer. And I think your next guys up don't really have to be considered for a little bit further down the road until then. But next up for me would be Christian Watson or Rasheed Walker. Really depends on what both of them do this year. Watson's got to put together a complete season for the first time in his career, and Walker's got to really see how he shapes up relative to the rest of the offensive line. It's possible he doesn't have a job in the future just because of what the Packers have at tackle outside of him, depending what happens with Jordan Morgan. We'll see, though. Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt, I would say both have a ways to go. They're going to demand premium extensions because they are first-round picks and because that sort of thing matters. It sets you on a path for more money. They also are a little bit further down the pecking order for extensions because both of them are already under contract through 2026 if their fifth-year option gets picked up. If it's not, you're probably not worrying about extending them a whole lot anyway. But related to that, how many players from the 2022 class are Packers beyond 2026? A bunch of contenders right now. I think you've got 6 guys that are possible contenders here. Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt, of course. You got to think about your first-round picks. Christian Watson and Zach Tom, as we've mentioned, and then Romeo Doubs and Rasheed Walker. If I had to guess right now, I would say both Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt end up leaving after their rookie contracts run out, either through fifth-year options or more likely not having those fifth-year options picked up. And then of the 4 guys remaining, they keep no more than 3 out of those remaining 4. So you've got Christian Watson, Zach Tom, Romeo Doubs, and Rasheed Walker. I think Tom is for sure going to get extended. Watson, if he takes steps forward, is physically unique in ways that are hard to ignore, so you'd probably look at keeping him around. And then 1 of 2 for Doubs and Walker, depending on a few other things on the roster. Finally, just prognosticating the roster here a little bit, I think QB2 is going to be Sean Clifford, at least based on this point. Remember, we're preseason games, so there's not a lot we can do. Packers are going to go with Dillon as their second running back unless Marshawn Lloyd makes an outrageous surge during training camp. Offensive tackle 3 looks like it's going to be Kadeem Telfort right now. Long way to go on that one. Offensive line can move a lot between now and week 1. The right guard is going to be, I think, Jordan Morgan. I think he's solidifying his hold there. Second quarterback looks like Eric Stokes for now. And then safety 2 is going to be Javon Bullard. I think he's going to be the nominal second safety, which may not mean that much depending how the rotation goes with Evan Williams, but we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out here early in the season. But basically, I would say count on the favorites for right now and see how things shake out beyond that. So I've got for you in this episode of Blue 58. I appreciate you tuning in. I'd appreciate it even more if you take a second and share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it. It's going to help more people find the show and get more people involved in this conversation that you and I are having about the Green Bay Packers, which in turn is going to help all of us, me included, become smarter Packers fans. And as I always say, smarter Packers fans are better Packers fans, and better Packers fans are what we all want to be. I'm your host, John Meerdink. We'll see you next time on Blue 58.